Hi, Stan Morrical here from Morrical Financial Services in beautiful Burlingame, California, coming to you from our offices with views of the San Francisco Airport and San Francisco Bay. Today I want to welcome my old friend Frank Hunt. Frank is an old friend that I met at Burlingame High School about 20 years ago, and Frank was our informal coach of a running group that we had that got together on Tuesday nights. We did a track workout every Tuesday night, and Frank was always gracious enough to put together our workouts, and then gracious enough to give a little crack of the whip if we needed some help to get the workouts done. So we had a great group, and it was great fun. And at that time, I hadn't been on a high school track since high school. So, and our group grew, and I still have friends that, in addition to Frank, other friends that go back to that time. So it was great fun. Up until now, we've been doing videos we've included materials from the Department of Labor, we've included materials from experts like Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics last year, on savings and behavior and so forth. But I thought we would shift gears now, and what we really want to do is the purpose of all this, the purpose of having a retirement plan, purpose is so that you can actually be able to retire with income. And I think sometimes in the thousands of trees that get killed every year and the millions of gallons of ink spilled by the investment industry and the retirement plan industry, we overlook the fact that it's actually about people retiring. And so what we're going to do is shift gears and come to you with some real stories over the next few videos of people that have actually retired and what their experience is. So Frank's been gracious enough to join me today, and I'm very excited to just chat with him briefly. Frank, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good to see you.
Maybe we should get back on the track again.
Well, maybe we should.
Yes.
Speaking of crack of the whip.
Yep, exactly.
Well, Frank, if you don't mind sharing with us today, a couple of things. How old were you when you retired?
Actually, I was 60 and a half.
60, okay.
I had a plan to retire at 62, but opportunity knocked, and I walked through the door and retired at 60 and a half.
Good for you.
Absolutely.
And so how long have you been retired now?
That'll be almost 19 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind helping us with a little math there, Frank, help those of us that are more math. How many years now? So how old are you now?
I could say I'm 25, but that would, I think the TV would show that I'm lying. No, I'm 79 years old. I turned 79 in June.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
So that's great. That's great. So when you were in your 30s and 40s, do you actually recall sitting down and thinking about your retirement income and planning, and actually sitting down with a calculator and kind of figuring out what you thought your sources of income might be and where they might come from, and what they might be actually?
Well, back in those days, it was an hibiscus, but that's neither here nor there. Actually, when you're young, and I was young back then, at first I didn't think too much about it, but as you mentioned, when you turn 30, 40, you're reaching in that area there, you really have to start looking ahead, believe it or not. And at that point, I really did start, kind of, here's what I have. Is this going to allow me to retire when I want to? And at that time, it was still in my early 60s. I didn't want to work till, the end of time. And everything looked okay. I was starting to put money away in my 401k. I hadn't really done too much. When I first started, pensions were very common. And so I started with the company that I worked for. They had a pension plan. And the pension plan was going to pay me, as I recall, the average of the last 5 years of earnings.
Oh.
So that looked good.
Yeah.
And then in the 80s, the government kind of changed all that, because pension plans had to be fully funded, unlike some of the ones today in the public sector. But back then in the private sector, they had to be fully funded. And the company decided that they were going to get out of the pension business, and they took the money that we'd accumulated so far, that they were putting away, and they came up with a number that was mine that would grow at 8% a year.
Oh, wow.
Okay? And then they converted fully to 401k. And at that time, you could only put stock into your company. And there was no diversification within that 401k.
Oh, wow. So only company stock in the 401k.
Exactly.
This is in the 80s.
This was in the 80s.
So
and I happened to work for a bank. And that bank went from about $30 a share. It worked its way down to about $5 a share when I was 40. And I thought, my God, I'm going to have to work forever. And I said, if it ever gets to $30 a share, I'm selling, I'm diversifying, I'm doing whatever I can. And the companies, and not just the company I work for, but all decided that they knew that you couldn't have all your eggs in one basket. You had to diversify within your 401k. So on the one hand, I had the 401k I was building. On the other hand, I had a pile of money that had been put aside for me when the pension plan was
when the company froze the pension plan.
Exactly.
Got it.
But the good news was they froze it, and then because it was a high interest rate time, they guaranteed you 8% a year.
Imagine that today.
Exactly. And believe me, when I saw that money at the time I did retire, that, you know, I had been tracking it all along, but when you really looked at it, you said, that was a good deal.
That was a great deal.
Didn't seem like it at the time, but it was a good deal.
So you gave some thought to it.
Yeah.
There was some thinking about it along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. You know, along with what I was doing on the other side, which was, you know, and then I had a little bit going in my stock portfolfolio that I set up for myself.
That's good. Good.
So you want to do different things.
Yeah. Now, if you don't mind sharing with the group today, where is, just in general terms, what are your sources of retirement income?
Probably pretty much the same as many people if they planned ahead. Of course, I had Social Security, and I get that.
Yeah.
I have my pension money was being distributed to me now.
Okay.
That was set aside, and of course my 401k, which I'm now required once I turn 70 to take the percent that's the minimum. Yeah, the minimum percent, yeah. Which is what I take, and I also am coaching on the outside at a high school. And
by the way, at 79, Frank is still running regularly and coaches a local high school cross-country team. Yeah. Are you working with the track team as well?
And I work with I run the distance part of the track team, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm head coach, cross-country, and distance coach within the track team.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
And so I have, so that gives me
multiple sources. So there's multiple sources of income, including even your part-time job as a coach.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, great. It sounds like that's also a benefit just beyond the income that you get from it, or maybe even more than the income.
For sure. And, you know, looking actually right now, I know that I look at some of my friends that happen to be the same age as I am, and I'm very fortunate. Number one, you have to win the gene pool to be able to still function at this point in time. But I do really look at what I do with the kids. They keep you young. There's no way being around young people, you can't stay young, think young, etc. Can I run with them anymore? No. It gradually went from running behind the slowest people to running the same routes that they were running, but in reverse, so that I could see that they were doing what I asked them to do, to now where I have an assistant coach that actually can go out and run with them. But,
so maybe in addition to multiple sources of income, staying active and hanging out with young kids is a good idea too. So
it is. Yeah. And, you know, and everybody has their own thing. And yeah, I do still function with older people. I'm here today, but you can't just, you know, you just can't.
And we both have white hair. I'll add.
No comment.
Yeah,
I look at,
yeah.
I don't want to look at the glare. But anyway.
Well, if you were today sitting across from your 40-year-old self, would you have any advice?
You know, first of all, plan ahead. At one point, somebody once told me, and this is probably the most important advice I ever got, but I didn't take it. I didn't get it until I was in my 30s and 40s. They asked me, when do you plan to retire? You know, and the answer was, oh, I plan to retire at 62, 65, somewhere in there before, you know, I don't want to work forever. And they said, okay, when are you going to start doing something? And I said, oh, in a few years. And they said, you should be starting the day you take your job. That was their advice. I look back now, of course, and say, if I'd actually taken that advice, you know, it would have made maybe a huger difference in what's left of, you know, what you have coming to you. So my advice to anybody would be, I know when you're 20 years old, you're sure as heck not thinking about the future that far out, but you look at it and you go, wow, that was really...
But at 79, it's good advice.
It would have been, you know...
At 70, your 79-year-old self will tell your 40-year-old self...
Trust me, when I was 40, I thought it would have to work forever when the stock in my company went to $5. I said, oh my God, I'm going to have to work forever.
Have there been any big surprises, positively or negatively, in your retirement?
Not really. The fact that you have to start taking your 401k money required, first of all, that puts you, if you've done the right things, it may put you in a higher tax bracket that you don't want to go into, but you don't have a choice at that point. And that's probably a good thing. That's, if you have to pay taxes, it means you're making some money. I had a client one time sold a building for $5 million, and he said, I'm going to have to write a check to the government for $1 million. And you know what that means? It means I made one heck of a lot of money. And he was not negative about it. He was actually positive. Nobody wants to write a check, but the fact that he could write it was very nice.
That is good. That is good. Yes. Is there anything in addition to that you want to share before we wrap up today?
No, just reiterate again that start planning as soon as you can. The sooner the better. Diversify, of course. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, as I did at that one point in my life. And certainly, live as long as you can and live a good quality of life, and use that money to make that quality of life work for you.
Excellent. Well, Frank, thank you very much for coming in today. We appreciate your advice. We're thrilled that you've had a great retirement without any surprises. And for all of you watching today, thank you for your time. And if you'd like to talk to us about details, how we can assist you in your planning, whether you or your employees, we'd love to chat with you. Thanks again for your time.